Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hey, and welcome to Plant Problems. This is your host, Tony Frischknecht. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have been working hard, very hard, to kind of bring you guys some amazing information. Before I bring out my next guest, I want to talk to you a little bit about still the infancy that we are of the cannabis industry. This brings us around where we are as an industry. Our industry is still so new. People are figuring out what it takes to become one of the big few. And there's so much that is being discussed right now, how to get to that point. How can I become one of those people? How can I run multiple stores at once? How can I be that general manager of a state of facilities? How do I build myself into president, CEO of a company? These people are figuring this out as they go along, although they probably have skills from other parts of industries that they have been in already. They're bringing these to the cannabis world. And the cannabis world is the people that have been around for a while. This probably is a little unnerving to them as well because it's different. Nobody's seen it yet. So we're starting to see this shift happening, and there is consolidation happening. There is some big name brands that are starting to erupt from the small industry as it once was. Bringing places like California on and how much of a boost that is for cannabis and where it's taking us is something that is going to be looked back on decades from now as like that was the time. Even though I actually think the time was already a while ago, this is the next step, the next generation. I listen to people talk about how they feel, the pioneers have opened up and now we've gotten this point. And those people that are still here, are they passing the torch? Are they handing this over to somebody new? Are they building for the future? Not just what got them here, but are they building for the future? And that's a big part of this. Building your company to last another 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, however you see it, whatever your vision is, what is your long-term vision? Do you have a long-term vision? My next guest has done some incredible things the last couple decades. She actually started a real estate investment firm. She's launched a cannabis brand into the Canadian market. She's also working over in Europe, in Germany and Switzerland. She has put herself in an amazing position. Last year, she accepted for one of the 50 most powerful women in cannabis through High Times in 2019. She was also given the prestigious job of CEO of Bhang Chocolates. She is blazing trails right now and busting through the cracked glass ceilings at this point. So, Jamie, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. And I'm so excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm great. All things considered.
Yeah, it is an interesting time. There are, especially, now we're getting into close to 420. It's going to be unique to see how everything kind of pans out. A lot of us are doing different Zoom videos and Skypes, and we're finding little patterns there and happy hours and different things like that. So I'm sure you've been doing videos constantly since the last couple of weeks at least. So now that you've had a chance to, a little over a year now of being CEO of Bhang, I know you were president before.
Oh, no. I've only been CEO since December 4th.
Oh, December 4th. I'm sorry. Okay, so.
It's under 90 days. Yeah.
So you're still feeling it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Has it sunk in yet?
In some respects, it feels like it's been a lifetime. December seems like so long ago because so much has happened in the last 3 months or 4 months, not just with Bhang, but just in the world in general. It's been an interesting Q1 And right now we're in the middle of our audit for the year end for 2019. And we always say this in the cannabis industry that you talk about living in dog years, and in cannabis, it's sort of like that, 6 months in cannabis is like 7 years in the regular world. And I definitely feel that. So yeah, I'm feeling it. In some ways, it's very real. And in other ways, it's surreal.
you just mentioned, you said you're doing year-end auditing for Bhang because you guys are traded on the Canadian Stock Exchange. And have you ever done that before? Have you been a part of the?
Never. Mm-mm. And that was hindsight's 2020. I don't know that going public was the right move for us, but it was definitely, we were pushed into it by many, many people saying, this is the only place you're going to get capital. And, we really were looking for expansion capital because our brand is, we're in 7 US states. We're in 9 foreign countries. Our CBD brand was expanding, and we just had a lot going on, and we're looking to capitalize on the pre-end of prohibition market. And you listen to the people that are smarter than you, and neither Scott, our founder and the former CEO, neither he nor I had any experience taking a company public. Now, that feels like a lifetime ago. That was July of last year. A lot's happened, and the education was fantastic. So in that respect, it was definitely a learning experience and something that I wouldn't trade for anything, because I'm 50 years old. When in a 50-year-old lifetime do you get the opportunity to do really new and cool things in a pivot in a career? Because I had been doing real estate for 25 years. That was my career. I would say my second career after I, had kids. Before that, I was a school teacher, and I've lived multiple lifetimes. And so I feel really blessed that I had the opportunity to be side by side with Scott when we took the company public. Now I'm running a publicly traded company, and every single day I'm learning something new, the do's and don'ts, who you can trust, who you can't, what you can say, what you can't. And I'm enjoying it.
Well, just the simple fact that there's no manual for this, right?
Right.
There's nobody that's
having children.
Yeah. It's so hard for, I think, a lot of people out there, especially the listener out there, to really understand that you are literally carving these trails out as you go, because there's nobody to show you that way. I mean, of course, there's companies that have been going public for decades, right? That's nothing new. But you've got a lot of new regulations that are changing on all the time. You've also got this understanding of reporting as a public company, which is huge. And that's got to be an immense amount of pressure on you on a daily basis, I imagine.
I guess maybe the way I'm wired, I don't view it as pressure. I view every single decision that comes my way as I have to just collect as many facts as I can and make the best decision possible. But what I'll tell you, we have a lot of experience at Bhang is, we're 10 years old. We've been putting cannabis products in people's hands for 10 years, and excellent products at that. And really, we're known for raising the bar, having been that first company that put professionally packaged products on shelves with nutritional fact panels, with Lloyd's of London liability insurance, with cannabis as an ingredient. So when we talk about a company that started doing that 10 years ago, and I've been with Bhang a little over 4.5 years, going on my 5th year. So, I wasn't there at the beginning, but 5 years ago when I started talking to Bhang and I was negotiating the Cypress Hill deal with Bhang is how I got connected to the company. Back then, Bhang was already in 5 or 6 states and was, or maybe it was 4 or 5 at the time. And you already had to learn how to navigate. I was with Bhang when we navigated from going medical to going rec in California, going medical to rec in Michigan, through the beginning of the license in Illinois, and now going medical to rec in Illinois. So we've been through many regulation changes. We've had to bob and weave many times. Like, we have a very low CapEx and a low OpEx model that has allowed us to remain quick and nimble. And that's part of the reason we're still here. When I always use the pun, when the market weeds companies out, banks were still standing, because we've designed the company to withstand the regulatory climate, which is very uncertain. And until we have federal legalization, the companies that know how to do that are the ones you really should be looking at.
Well, in those first couple of years, from 2010 to 2013, I'm sure the founder was, you had to last this long now, to be 10 years out. It's fluid. It's a fluid thing all the time, back and forth, a lot of tug and pull. in Colorado, we had counties that would allow recreation sometimes and then take it away the next. When the new sitting people, the committees would come in, they'd take it away. So absolutely, it crushed a lot of people.
I think about 5 years ago, one of my first things that I did for Bhang was I would collect cash and pay bills. And, I'd be traveling with big wads of cash in my suitcase, and fortunately we don't have to do that anymore. We actually have a bank account and, we're one of the lucky ones. But I didn't even blink an eye having $50,000 or $60,000 in my suitcase.
What did people think when you talked to them about that? Like, I'm sure friends and family you would talk about,
Yeah, my dad was not a big fan, not a big fan of me traveling with that much cash. But I really do look like a soccer mom. I don't look like a drug mule or anything like that. So I think, I have that going for me. I think I was the last person anyone thought was smuggling drugs or cash.
I used to get that in my bald head. I mean, nobody really, it didn't look like a stoner here in Colorado. It wasn't like normal.
Well, isn't that what you figure out is everybody's a stoner? Like really, everybody I know is like, hey, guess what? I love cannabis. I just haven't told anybody, Everyone comes out of the closet to you. The irony is I'm not a stoner. I'm not a big pot smoker. It makes me paranoid.
You know what's great about that though, too, is that coming from that type of mindset, you're able to actually show a lot of the outside of the industry. It's not that you have to be high to do this business and be good at it. You're just a businesswoman building a business.
100%. I also have a comfort around it because my dad's been cultivating for 55 years. So I grew up in the Reagan war on drugs with a dad growing plants.
Those were scary times.
Well, I never felt afraid. I just knew how, my parents taught me how to be careful, what you could say, what you couldn't say. People would come around to smoke pot with my dad, and I knew that's what they were doing. I just knew to make myself scarce, and I knew who all the stoners were in town. Everybody was a stoner in town. So it was an interesting thing how, I grew up with that. And then plus, I have a cousin in Cypress Hill, and they were out promoting legalization from day one. They've been on the scene 30, 40 years promoting legalization. So cannabis has been a really big part of my life, even though I personally wasn't using it. And that was the other thing. Nobody when I was in high school and everyone's like, you got to drink beer and you got to be part of that scene. Nobody in the marijuana scene was pressuring me to smoke pot. That just didn't happen. So coming into it, I realized it was an industry. I was watching my dad make Rick Simpson oil for people that had terminal cancer. And a family friend of ours is alive right now. She smoked marijuana for the first time at 72 years old with stage 4 colon cancer. And she's still alive. I know that it has medical benefits. I know people who use it for pain and sleep. And it's an industry. I'm watching over the last 5 years, big advertising agencies get involved. You're seeing, Molson Coors and some of these bigger beverage companies hedging their losses by making big investments because it's not going away. We're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. Cannabis is here. It's here.
Yeah. And the marketing arm that you have to basically suck up and do as a cannabis company is so overwhelming because it's money that you could use to be either somehow else growing your brand. You guys are doing some stuff on Instagram where you have different food posts every day of making different. I thought that's awesome. How's the feedback coming on that?
It's great. That's actually something Muggs did with DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill did with Scott. So Muggs and Scott arranged for him to go cook with Bhang. And it was funny because we're seeing all these celebrity chefs start cooking with cannabis. And we're like, hey, our founder's a chef. He should be doing this for us. He's so smart and he's a great chef. So it was natural. And we did that. And then we're launching into new packaging. We've refreshed our packaging. And, that first round of new packaging hits the shelves next week. We're very excited about that. So we've been kind of using the Instagram to launch that slowly but surely. And we did a Baked with Bhang quarantine challenge and asked people to shoot TikTok videos using chocolate in their recipes. And we're having a little contest. That's been phenomenal. So we're really enjoying seeing the recipes come through. And we might extend that as long as they keep keeping us at home, we might keep that going.
Well, yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, everybody's at home. Why not?
And people are baking. Yeah.
Well, there's no flour at the store unless you went 2 months ago, but whatever, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that Scott is probably enjoying himself cooking a lot more than being the leader of the company at this time. I'm sure the last 10 years have fried him out. I know when you get to 5, 6 years, it's just such a battle. To have to reset is something that I think is difficult for a lot of people, and it's understandable.
Well, he had the deal to step down as the leader before we went public. He said, look, I'm a chef. I haven't run a publicly traded company before. So he really never intended to be the CEO of Bhang post going public, but he still is with the company, obviously, doing the recipes. He's working on other things, like he's helping us open up the Mexico market. He's just a very smart entrepreneurial person. So, we're happy to have him stick around. That was one of my concerns is, was he going to stay? And thankfully, he's not going anywhere.
Well, that's great. And he obviously loves to be around it still, I would sense.
Yeah, his baby.
Yeah, exactly. That's also very big of him for understanding where his value in the company is. And it's not running it. So
he helps. It's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's all me. He definitely helps. And the team we've got Sam Collins, who's our CMO, and we plucked her out of Treasury Wine Estates. She was the brainchild behind the 19 Crimes wine. She developed that living wine label where you look through your phone at the wine and it comes to life. So she's brilliant. She was the spearhead behind our packaging refresh, which is brilliant. We have Nicole Hanratty, who's our global director of marketing. She's absolutely phenomenal. Like, our marketing department's fantastic. We've got a really strong sales department. Our THC sales lead is a guy named Anthony Collin, who is working side by side because we just took our brand back in California, and he's been, working with our new distributor, Shelf Life. So that's been going really well. So our team is super strong. And I'm probably forgetting people. And if they're going to watch this, I don't want to hurt people's feelings, but, I just think one of the best things we have about Bhang is our team. And obviously our products are amazing, as evidenced by the fact that we launched in Canada in February, and we're immediately the number 1 and number 2 edible in Ontario and Alberta. And that's reported by the Ontario Cannabis Store. Like, the provinces themselves, that's how it works in Canada, is you have to sell to the province, and then the province sells to the dispensaries. So we don't really get great sales data coming out of Canada, but what's been shared with us is that, Bhang's number 1 and number 2 in those 2 provinces, and probably in Saskatchewan as well, where they don't really have their data kind of poop in a group yet. But that's not the number 1 and 2 chocolate in Canada. That's the number 1 and 2 edible in Canada. Very, very strong, robust sales. We're really happy about that.
You guys' timing is also impeccable too, by the way. I mean, you're landed right at the right time, which is awesome, right?
Well, and it took a lot of planning. Like, that didn't just happen overnight. That kitchen had to be up last summer. They had to be, ordering their chocolate. We had to do chocolate demand planning because the chocolate comes from South America and Africa, and it has to, we have to give our chocolate company time to get that imported. So a lot of planning goes into launching something like that. And, it really took about 18 months, all getting the kitchen built out, the machines.
There's Canada Health in there too to go through all that. And that's a lot of
work. They got to look at your packaging. They got to look at your recipes. So yeah, in order to launch in like February, you had to have your ducks in a row the year before. And that's, we're getting ready to launch Nevada. We were actually going to launch Nevada on March 14th. And on March 10th, they got the shelter in place order. And they also shut down curbside delivery in Nevada. So our Nevada, I just talked to our Nevada licensee today. They're sitting there with chocolate ready to go. And they're like, well, do we launch or do we not launch? And, we've already announced to the world that we were going to launch, and we had a launch party planned, and COVID hit. So, but the reality is you have to punt, and that's what we're great at. So we're going to punt. We're going to figure it out. And we'll launch in Nevada when the time is right, and make sure that the people of Nevada know that Bhang's there and ready to go. And we've got our partnership with True Leaf in Florida. They still don't have edibles in Florida. That's one of those things, like another great partner for us in Florida. And our partner up in Illinois can't keep Bhang on the shelves. Like, we're really happy with where the THC chocolate's going.
When you go into new states that are opening up or already open, what are you looking for in a new licensee or a new partner? What are your main things? You're like A, B, and C. They need to hit this criteria.
Well, first of all, they have to have, I would say, already a pretty solid distribution plan in place. If they're not already distributing, have some of those contacts, because that's a really, everybody can grow and make cannabis products. The hard part is getting them on the shelves. And that is a relationship game. So that's kind of the first thing I want to see, is that they're already well established in the game. The second thing is they've got to be well capitalized, because it takes a lot of money to bob and weave in uncertain regulatory environment. And then kind of the third cherry on top is, are they in good graces and do they have good political contacts? Because I really have found that the companies that operate with that transparency and have kind of an open door policy with regulators and have a good rapport with regulators are the ones that do well, because they're typically kind of not in a position to ask permission. They ask forgiveness, because the reality is somebody has to blaze the trail. And you sort of do that by establishing a rapport and a trust with the regulators and saying, this is what everybody's doing in California, or this is what everybody's doing in Colorado, or whatever. And then the regulators, you have their ear so you can explain to them what you're doing. And so I think the companies that have those three things, basically a good, strong distribution relationship, are well funded and are connected to the regulators. Those are kind of my first three bucket list items. And then from there, everything's workable.
Yeah, I completely agree. They don't know. They're trying to figure this out at the same time we are. So that transparency that you bring up, it makes a lot of sense. And for the listeners out there, it's not that you're trying to get one over on them. You're just trying to show them exactly what you're doing and tie it together and linearly so they can understand, oh, well, they're not hiding something from me. They're showing me how operations operate all over the US at this point.
Yeah, great examples. Scott's working in Mexico right now. We don't have anything going. We're just putting feelers out. But he got invited to one of the meetings where they're trying to figure out amounts. In the meeting, they were talking about in one part of cannabis having a 10% amount. And what you have to understand is 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but if it's 10% of this or 10% of that, what that can translate into is in grams, like in gram weight of cannabis per chocolate, for example, a percentage difference like that, it could mean having a 400 milligram chocolate bar. Well, a typical dose, like I would recommend to a new user to use 2.5 milligrams. So if you are now saying as Mexico, well, we're going to let you have 400 milligrams, everyone's going to go to Mexico because that product's going to be out like crazy strong. But they're thinking, 10%. Well, we're making it really weak, but they have to understand how that math works. So when you're working side by side with the legislator going, hang on a second, you make the decision, because maybe you want strong cannabis for cancer patients or for people that have built that tolerance and need it for pain or whatever you're doing, but understand how the math works. And when you're working side by side with the legislators and educating them, you're doing that really as a service to the entire industry, because you're not trying to get one over on them. So I really like working with people that have emotional intelligence enough to understand that that's what the whole point is. Because part of it too is when you think about 10 years ago, the people that you had to choose from to get into bed with were criminals. They were people that were very comfortable breaking the law. And now as time has gone on, you've got more and more professional business people coming to the table. And not that everybody was a criminal. I don't want to say it like that. There were a lot of good businessmen out there, businesswomen in the cannabis game, and that were working really hard to make cannabis accessible to everybody. But the pool to choose from is very different today than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, we've gotten some serious money that have come to the table. Going public changes a lot of that, right? Because you have a lot of regulations you have to follow. And you've had a lot of people fall out. And if they've fallen out, they've tried to go to other states that aren't legal at all, and they're trying to cultivate something to go on there and still maintain that lifestyle rather than growing up. Because, like you said, we can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's going to happen. It's a matter of where you're at in the pipeline to see where your company is going to be. I talked for a minute before I brought you on, but coming on to looking at decades ahead, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, where do you see your company being? And when you go public, you have to have visions of that stuff in order to succeed and be one of the big players. And Bhang's been around a long time. You started off in New Mexico, correct?
Actually, in Oakland, California.
Oakland, okay.
Born in Oakland, yep. New Mexico was our second location.
Okay. So along those ways, you've built your licensee, and God, I'm sure you have some incredible stories about the licensees that you worked with, because they definitely changed where you're going. But you've also learned, and one thing I wanted to talk to you about is the mentorship that you've worked on in the past, and even before cannabis was a big part of your life, or at least paid your bills. When people are seeking mentors in cannabis, it's like you said before, we used to have a really small pool. Who do you look to as, I want to get around that person. I really like what they've got to offer, or I just like the feeling of that, because it's a different feeling when you get around somebody like that. How do you decide that stuff, or how do you come along across people like that?
Well, I'm lucky because one of the first people I met in cannabis, I consider my mentor, and he's one of Bhang's co-founders. His name is Richard Sellers. I live in Montana. He lives in California. So, it's all over the phone. But he's just a really smart businessman. And I always tease him about being a Zen master because he's super unflappable. And he's given me a lot of insight into how to just kind of let things roll off you like water off a duck's back. You just have to take it all in as information. And so those are some of the lessons that I've learned. But I've always had a mentor in my life, and I've always been a mentor. And I believe that, and I talk about this, like in my acceptance speech at the High Times Female 50, I talked about the fact that mentorship is really, for women especially, it forces you to kind of, if you've got a really good mentor, they're going to point things out to you, areas of weakness that you need to work on. And they're also going to let you know where you're doing things right. And it's always good to have that guidepost giving you that insight that's outside looking in, because you are the voice in your head and you can convince yourself of anything. So having a voice outside your head for me, is really important. And I want to help other women succeed in cannabis, or in my former life in real estate. I mentored men and women, and have a lot of people in cannabis or in real estate that would tell you that they would consider me the reason that they've been successful. And I think part of that is when you view the world as abundant, which I do, I think there's enough for everybody. I think there's enough time, there's enough deals, there's enough money, and there's enough knowledge. And if you share what you have with other people, rather than saying that's mine and I can't share it with you, but when you are open, I feel like you open up the whole world, and that person's sphere of influence becomes part of yours. And you sort of just engage a larger world. And I just think mentorship, both having one and being one, is a huge part of personal development for me as a leader. So, I encourage everybody to get one and be one.
It's amazing that you got that so early. It's hard to have that explanation for people that are like, well, I know I should have a mentor, but do I just ask them to be my mentor? It doesn't really work like that all the time.
I always tell people, because I get this question a lot because I speak about it. And here's my answer to that. People who are open to being mentors have no problem saying yes to being a mentor, but you have to come to the table and bring something of value, right? So you can't just walk up and say, look, I know you're super busy and you've got all this knowledge and I want you to pour it into my head. You have to say, look, I know you're super busy, so I'll give you some of my time. And these are the things I can offer you. In exchange, what I would like is this, and that I prefer that open, direct conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm mentoring a guy right now that said, look, I may not have the money to do this deal, but I'll do the boots on the ground, sweat equity, so to speak, because I don't have that time. And so we're talking about, well, what would that look like? And if we're going to continue this mentor-mentee relationship and we're going to maybe potentially do a deal together, what is that going to look like? That's what I think you have to do when you're asking somebody. First, it's flattering for someone to come to me and say, you're amazing, I want you to be my mentor. But then there is only so much of me to go around. There would have to be a compelling reason now, because doing what I'm doing now is
takes all your time.
All my minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So for the listeners out there, when you're approaching somebody, try to give them. Don't really ask them for stuff. Just try to give them. And pretty soon they'll say, oh, yeah, you could do that for me and you could do that. And all of a sudden, that's how you bring value. Because there's so many people that are in your position that your time is getting stolen from you constantly. That's why I really appreciate you spending your time with us today, because it's very valuable to a lot of people out there that are thinking IPO or thinking long-term businesses. This is a mental game that you play with yourself daily on. What are the steps I need to get there, and how do I get there? Well, mentor-mentee relationships build a lot of that, and they also build trust.
I learn a lot from my mentees, because one of the things I can't do is go back in time and have the view of the world through a lens that doesn't have my knowledge, right? So sometimes they come to me with a perspective that is so unique. It's definitely valuable for me to be around them as well. I will say that part of the reason I like having mentees is that fresh perspective that they bring to the table. Sometimes the questions that they ask me cause me to think about things differently. And that paradigm shift, you're always, as a leader, looking for that paradigm shift. Because if you're always going linearly down a path, that might be fine. But I think I don't want to run a good company. I want to run a great company. And you do that by constantly striving to get better. And every little thing that you can do to make you better, those little tweaks, I'm looking for those. And I've found them in my real estate life, that being a mentor is definitely one of them. So I'm definitely going to continue doing it in the cannabis world.
Well, great observation as well. I mean, you've had some great successes, and it's very easy to go down that road of, I know a lot, or I know more than that person. You don't do it on purpose. It's just you start thinking, you can easily start tricking yourself and kind of believing your own stuff all the time rather than paying attention to who's right next to you. And those are the people that are developing this industry right now. The younger generation is full on. I mean, when you brought up 400 milligram edibles, I mean, my gosh, there's very few people that need those. If you look at the market, it's a small amount.
Oh, they would disagree with you.
They would. I know. I
think about the 1,000 milligram Korova cookie. And I remember the first time I saw that, I'm like, 1,000 milligram cookie. But man, when that edible law changed in California to 100 milligrams, I realized that there are people that use cannabis for pain and for chemotherapy, nausea tolerance, all kinds of things. And when you've built a tolerance for cannabis, it gets very expensive.
Medical side, absolutely. That's what we've seen. That's still happening. The medical side here is still really big on that. Recreational side, though, when they switched to that, I remember all the edibles makers here freaking out about us making these smaller, and by gosh, man, they sold just as much or more, and they were putting less raw product in there, and it turned out really well for them. But you're right. There's a different array of people, users for this, especially the long terms. You're talking pain for sure. When you come back to it, if you hadn't, I remember talking to specific edible makers. I was like, man, I hardly ever touch edibles. 2.5 is my max, right? So they're like, oh, no way. 2.5 years later, they're making 2.5 and 5 milligram edibles because the market was calling for it.
Yeah, microdosing is definitely huge. Definitely picking up steam more and more. And that's interesting to see too. It was interesting when we made the switch in California, our biggest sellers were the 240 milligram bars. Those were our heaviest dose. And those bars sold the most. So one of them was blueberry, for example. Blueberry was a huge seller. Well, then when everything went to 100, not so much. And so we realized, everybody was buying it. We thought the blueberry bar was so great. It is great. It's organic blueberries, organic blueberry oil. They're amazing. The chocolate bars are amazing. Yeah, they were buying milligrams.
Well, and I think you still see it on the THC levels when you're buying flower. I think it's still seeing a lot of that. And that's a lot of the newbies too that are going forward too. They just think the strongest, but after a while you're like, my body likes a little bit less.
Well, I always say you don't always go to the bar and order a shot of Everclear,
Exactly. You got Bud Light and you got Everclear, and they're completely different alcohols. So, well, Jamie, thank you so much for sharing everything you did with us today. You have an amazing future ahead of you, as we all do in cannabis. It comes with its challenges, but it's also forging the way for where we see ourselves in 5, 10, 20 years in cannabis. So if you're looking to be that next big company of cannabis, the corporation of cannabis, you have to think this far ahead. As you can see, Jamie is well on her way. And how do they get a hold of you?
So we've got 2 websites. We have bangnation.com, which is our site that has all the investor information on it and all of the THC information on it. bhangcbd.com is our e-commerce site where we sell our hemp-derived CBD products, which we've had in the United States for 9 years. We were one of the first companies out there with CBD CPG. So award-winning chocolate and isolate and all kinds of great products on our CBD site. And, that's where you can reach out to us. We've got a contact there, and I'm an open book and available for all of our fans. We've got a lot of fans.
Well, I've seen them. I've definitely been scouring the internet, and you guys do have a big following. So great to see a company that's made it through the beginning stages. I think we have a long way to go, but through the beginning stages are huge. And I'm proud to know that there's people out there like you that are willing to share with just anybody. Also, the mentee mentor program that you're developing, that's amazing too. These are all big things that you're learning, helps everybody else learn, but it also is the future of turning this industry into a full-fledged business industry where people are understanding. So, Jamie, thank you so much for being on today. And I look forward to seeing your future success. And thanks for being on Plant Problems.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in today. I always value what you guys are thinking. So please visit plantproblem.com. Leave me any question, comments, or reviews there. I have a new episodes out every week, and you can tune in to the next thing in line. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblem.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.